Have you got a rough idea the number of children that the task force, through its identification work, has rescued or saved or whatever the word might be?
Thousands. Literally thousands. If that employee hadn't remembered that, there would have been ongoing horrendous abuse. But thankfully, the moons aligned. He just said, why do you do this? And I think I said, it's all about the children in the pictures, which it is.
Which it is. I'm Andrew Rule. This is Life and Crimes. We're back again to resume talking to Detective Inspector Jon Rouse about his work with Task Force Argos, which has had tremendous success against child sex offenders.
Yeah, hi Andrew, it's great to be back. Thanks very much.
Your task force Argos, which to some extent has become yours, it over the last decade or more has become very well known to agencies around the world because of its high rate of success and expertise. Can you just tell our listeners how that came about? Why a unit in Brisbane in Australia punches well above its weight in world terms in the detection of child sex offenders? How did you come to build Task Force Argos into such an international heavyweight operator?
Good question, I guess. I think a whole lot of moons aligned progressively over years. We had, going back in time, we had Bob Atkinson was my commissioner when we kind of started into this journey. Bob was a brilliant police commissioner. We had, in the early period there, we had Judy Spence was the Minister for Police. So we had good support for legislative reform and capability, which is a great thing. So when we wanted laws implemented, the government listened to us. We were the first state to criminalise child exploitation material and to call it that and not call it child pornography. Still a bugbear for me.
Yeah. Point that out to our listeners. You never call it child pornography.
Never, ever will you hear that pass my lips, ever.
You point out to, and I mean, I didn't realise this until you said it, that pornography sort of implies some sort of consent, that pornography is between consenting adults. Obviously, this isn't that. This is children being abused by adults. These are crimes, and the pictures and images that are shown are actually crime scene pictures.
100%. That's exactly right. They are a moment in time when a criminal act was captured. It is not pornography. I haven't got a dictionary in front of me, but by definition, pornography is material that by its nature causes arousal. So the only people that can call it pornography are child sex offenders.
Right. Okay.
Us calling it that just normalizes and legitimizes it, and so there's been a global move for 20 odd years to get this out of our language. I get incensed when I hear the media call it global kiddie porn bust. Oh, just
the sort of shorthand is it's understandable, but it's wrong.
Yeah, it is. So look, we had great organisational support, great ministerial and government support through successive governments. And I guess the other thing was that we didn't have a mandated rotation policy in the unit. We resisted that. A lot of agencies won't let you work in this crime type for any more than say, for example, 3 years. I don't know where they pull 3 years out of the bag. You can see something and go in 5 minutes. So why they decided 2 or 3 years is your maximum tenure is beyond me. But what happens when you rotate people is you lose your expertise, you lose your networks, you lose your connections, you lose your knowledge, your skill, everything goes. So for those that want to dedicate their career to this particular discipline, we've got psychometric testing, welfare, a range of support services in place. And, I was an online operative in the early 2000s. I've been online and I was dealing with child sex offenders that were abusing their kids. So I can walk the talk. So when my staff are having a problem, I can talk to them about it because I've been there.
Yep.
So I've been in there for, 25 years. Paul from our VID team from the UK, 25 years. Stu, one of our operatives, he's been at Argos 21 years. You've got a lot of service in there, and we've made every mistake known to man, which puts us in a good position to make sure that the next generation doesn't do that.
Excellent. Yeah. So you've pulled together all this expertise. Yeah.
Yeah, probably critically. The thing is that we've developed and built networks that have sustained and lasted for so long. We can pick up the phone. We don't even need to pick up the phone anymore. We can message on secure apps just pretty much any part of the world now and get an investigation commenced, which is great because time is of the essence in a lot of these cases, and you need a colleague in Europe or the United States or Canada or South America who's going to just go. And that's what we've got now.
Gee, that's great.
There's a bit of it's overused now, but it takes a network to defeat a network is a very common term that we throw out there.
Yeah.
And that's a fact. It does. They're organised. They are criminal enterprises, and we need to work collectively across the globe in the same way that they do.
Now, you've mentioned some names here, and I'd just like our listeners to understand the details there, because really you and perhaps others have collected from around the world some very fine operators from different places. Who are these people and how did you come by them?
Well, in most cases, it was through an investigation. So Paul Griffiths, he worked in the United Kingdom as a VID expert. He worked in the Child Exploitation and Obscenities Team and the National Crime Authority and Manchester Police. I met Paul through a case that he literally referred to Australia in 2003, and
Yep.
We made the arrest in Queensland, and I got invited to speak about that conference at the Interpol meeting, and I met Paul at that meeting, and I gave him a plaque and thanked him for sending this case over because it rescued a little girl here in Australia, and
Yep.
we became friends. And a few years later, he wanted to move the family out of the UK, and we created a position in Argos, and he became our VID expert, victim identification expert.
Yep.
Warren Bulmer from Toronto Police, I worked with him on many cases starting in 2005.
Yeah.
He retired from the Toronto Police a couple of years ago, and we recruited him into the Australian Centre where I work now. Adele Desires, she's a French national police officer who was working at Interpol when I first met her. We recruited her into Task Force Argos. She's I don't have words for Adele and her capability or how many children have been rescued through her skill. Scott Anderson from the United States, he's got expertise in audio engineering, which is critical in VID. So we recruited him in from the Department of Homeland Security in the US.
So he's a former anti-terrorist operator?
Yeah, he worked in a range of fields supporting investigations for HSI, Department of Homeland Security.
Right.
Jonas Seider, he's from Denmark. Met him. He was seconded into Interpol, and we recruited him into the Australian Centre when we opened it up. And he's working in the VID team. So you've got some heavy hitting international capability there, all now working in the Australian Centre here in Brisbane, it's a good thing for kids, but it's even better for Australian law enforcement because we've got that opportunity to pass those skills on.
Now, our listeners will have a chance to see those very people that you mentioned in the forthcoming documentary, which is called The Children in the Pictures, which is actually the reason we're talking today. Perhaps you could just tell us how that came about. I think it goes back about 5 or 6 years, the origins of this documentary. From where you sit, how did it happen?
Well, in 2014, at Argos, we closed what was it was a pretty big operation into a darknet forum called the Love Zone, TLZ, and the administrator of that forum was in South Australia.
Yeah.
And it took us 2 years to do it, but we worked our way up. We identified the hierarchical structure. We took out all of these key members. We closed the operation, and it generated a fair bit of news, particularly because the head administrator was a childcare worker and he'd sexually abused 7 children under his care.
Right. This is Shannon McCool.
Yeah, correct. Shannon McCool.
How many years in jail would he get for that?
Well, I think the head sentence was over 50 years and he's to do, I think it's 28 years he got ultimately.
They took it fairly seriously.
7 children identified and, administering a network of 45,000 child sex offenders.
Yeah. He was a Mr. Big in this scene.
Certainly was,
And,
yeah, he
and
was.
just looking at the picture, he was an articulate, capable, obviously fairly intelligent, I would have thought, organised, sort of good-looking young fella, fresh-faced, could have been in any country footy team by the look of him, that sort of guy. And he was also an absolute fiend on the offending.
Yeah, I guess it goes back to what you asked before about, what do they look like? You
What do
don't
they look
know.
like? Well, he looked pretty good, really, if
Yeah.
you didn't know what he was up to.
Well, he certainly fooled his employers and the community he worked within for a long time. But that undercover operation brought him undone and dismantled that network, and that made some pretty big headlines. And one of the filmmakers was quite fascinated by all of that and started researching the topic, and he reached out to us wanting to delve into it more. At that time, for 7 years, we ran a conference before COVID. We ran a conference at the Gold Coast that brought in keynotes from all around the world, people that we've been working with, criminal psychologists, you name it. It was a fantastic event. And we brought them in here to Australia because our people here, whether they're the NGOs, law enforcement, prosecutors, childcare workers, they don't get exposed to this kind of level of international skill. So we'd bring them into the Gold Coast, and we would open up to the child protection community. And Deb was invited to come to the YPVC.
This is Arkham Dev?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Yep.
So he reached out. I said, look, we've got this conference. Come down and I'll give you, I'll talk to some of the speakers and see if they want to talk to you, which they did. And I think that just fueled his interest in the topic. And he started this concept of making a documentary about it. Our motivation behind supporting that was prevention, awareness, greater public understanding of what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Which I think that the documentary provides. But tragically, because it was filmed over, I think, 6 years, you can watch us, you can particularly watch myself anyway, age before your eyes.
The beards come and go, the suntans come and go, there's a few kilos come and go, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yep, it's just great.
Adele from France comes up pretty well, but her makeup's better than yours probably.
100%. Yep, I don't think I even wore makeup, though, back in the 80s when I was in a band. But, some of us shine a little bit better than others in it. But overarchingly, I think that they pulled together a difficult topic, and I'm hoping that it resonates and makes sense to people with the challenges, a lot of which we've talked about here today.
Made with enormous restraint. Simon Nash, who was the co-director, I think, with Arkham Dev, and clearly had a lot to do with writing for it and so on, very experienced filmmaker. He said he's never had so much access to so much archival footage, tens of thousands of images or millions perhaps, and yet unable to use any of them because they're just so distressing. And so they've been able to make a documentary about child sexual abuse without showing one frame of child sexual abuse, which is very good really, because it means it's about the people who you guys, it's about you people who pursue the offenders, and it's also about the offenders, and also about rescuing the children in the pictures, which of course is the title of the documentary.
That's I'm pretty sure Dev will tell you that's where the name of the film came from. He just said, why do you do this? And I think I said, it's all about the children in the pictures, which it is.
Which it is. And we'll be back after this. Now, speaking of this, one example tells 1,000 stories. One of the examples that you give in the documentary, or that is aired in the documentary, is a very potent one. It is the story of Girl One. How did it start?
Yeah, okay. So the Reader's Digest is it. We were running an operation called Achilles at the time, and that features in the documentary. And that was the first time we'd infiltrated a global child sex offender network, noting that there was, about 50 to 55 members back then compared to the hundreds of thousands we deal with now.
God.
During the course of the investigation, our undercover operatives in it were starting, and it's all about the children in the pictures. So when we infiltrate these networks, it's all about harvesting and getting all of the material that they're sharing to make sure that we're trying to find the kids. So there was one particular child, and the only source of this material, these images and videos, was this group that we'd infiltrated. So we, over the course of the investigation, kind of watched this poor little girl grow up. And it still is some of the most difficult material I've encountered.
So from the age of, say, 3 through to 7 or...
Yeah, like I think
whatever.
Paul and I have a discussion about one image of a 3-year-old that I believe it's her because of a particular freckle. But
Yep.
But yeah, we watched her going, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
And we set up a global investigation to try to rescue her. We were 100% confident that she was in the United States, so we worked very closely with the FBI.
Yep.
This is where, we brought Warren Bulmer in from Canada because of his skills, and he became part of that team. We had Interpol in the team.
Yep.
And we were working in a virtual environment around the clock to try to pull together the clues that would hopefully lead to her rescue.
Yeah.
There was a range of things that, vehicle, what we were pretty confident was a motel room, and we had to, Warren redacted the material so that we could get the FBI to share it.
So you could take the image of the child off the bed, but make it look as if the bedspread's just a bedspread, and that would show people that it was a certain colour and patterns. And also a couch. Was there a couch in the room?
Yep, there was a couch.
And light fittings?
Yeah, there was a range of... There's only a couple that are shown in the documentary, but that gives you the idea of what we were trying to do, because we wanted to get them across law enforcement, and we wanted inquiries conducted with hotel and motel chains.
Yeah.
So one forensic analyst in the United States really ran with that concept. Dawn Ego, she features in the documentary. She did a above and beyond job and pulled all of the clues that we'd gathered together in the operation, and ultimately identified who he was. FBI made the arrest about 4 or 5 months after we'd closed the operation.
In the end, Dawn, the really good policewoman in Maine, I think she came from, she refines this, boils it down to Georgia, somewhere in Georgia, a motel.
Well, we were pretty confident we knew that he was in Georgia through some of the clues that we had.
But, were you?
Yeah, but what we needed was somebody to do that heavy lifting inquiries with the hotel motel chains, which is what she did.
What sort of are you able to say roughly what sort of clues told you which state?
There was a range of things. So there was a partial close examination of images that were taken of the motor vehicle.
Yeah,
gave us a few clues about products that were available.
Right.
A partial postcode, a few other things that were picked up in the detailed examination of the images that the offender himself had taken.
Okay, so the clues are there if you look deeply, or they can be. They sometimes are partial clues, and then Dawn works back through these suppliers of linen and bedspreads and all the rest of it to hotels, and is able to boil it down to one place, and then she rings the manager of the motel. We're looking for this, and they're probably driving a Pontiac. What was it? A Pontiac Aztec, I think it was called.
Yep, that's right.
Which is like a little SUV thing, is it, or something? Station wagon thing. A particular colour, burnt orange. And I think, is it true that the manager said, "I know the car and I know the man"? The manager was onto it straight away.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you'll hear her say that in the documentary, that something twigged immediately. Always trust your gut. So for him to have stood out like that, for the employee to immediately go, "Yeah, I think I know who we're talking about,"
right,
was a good thing. Like sometimes these cases come together and sometimes they don't. But if that employee hadn't remembered that, there would have been ongoing horrendous abuse. But thankfully, the moons aligned.
Can you recall, if you can, what was the situation? Was it a guy and his daughter, or?
Yep. It was the father of the child. Yep, that's correct.
And this was for money? He was making money out of it?
No, there's no evidence of that. Once again, it was, I guess, leading to those things that we talked about before around the motivations behind offending.
An horrendous thing. over, and this has gone on from probably 3 until 8 years old.
Yep, absolutely. And
Any idea how life ends up for that child who's now, I guess, a teenager, late teens, is she?
I'd say now she's should be in her early 20s.
And have you ever had any feedback from the States about how that story panned out over time? Did she, what happened to her? It must be tantalising and fascinating, and you must be quite fearful about what happens to some of the people you rescue.
Look, I think one of the questions we get asked a lot is, how do you do this work, and how do you survive doing this kind of work for so long? And one of the golden rules that I've adhered to is that once we've done what we can, we've played our part. I don't look back.
Good.
So her current status I'm not aware of. I was given information that was confidential about how she was progressing after the rescue, which made it very clear to me that I really did not want to know anymore. But I guess the hard thing about the Girl One case was, for me anyway, was we hadn't found her when we closed the operation, and the operation was the only source of the material. So, for me, it wasn't a perfect ending to what was a really good investigation. It was particularly when we're focused on the kids. But we had offenders in Germany, the UK, Australia, right across the United States, and we'd had a timed, operational tactical closure that we had to adhere to, and there just wasn't anything I could do.
Looking at the big picture, you've worked, basically run the task force for all these years. Have you got a rough idea the number of children that the task force, through its identification work, has rescued or saved, or whatever the word might be?
Thousands, literally thousands. Yeah,
that is amazing.
Yeah, it's. We in the time I was there, we were sending, in excess of 1,000 investigative leads globally every year. So, it was a very, we have an incredible team there. It was very dedicated, passionate individuals that were are still very good at what they do. And if there's a benchmark that I'll look back on him when I guess I'm towing the caravan around Australia to reflect on, that, the best period of my working career was working in that unit with that body of men and women.
That is a remarkable thing. John, you're now in your 50s. I presume you won't work forever. There's probably I think there's a cut-off point in the Queensland Police, is there? They ask you to retire at a certain age, I think.
Yeah, look, the sun is 100% setting on my law enforcement career. We have to retire at 60, and I'm past the 58 mark now, so
right,
it's coming quick.
You can do the maths. It's been alleged to me that you are a very valued police officer who knows what they're doing, and probably, had you been interested, could have chased the promotions up the rank to whatever, further up the tree to wear the stuff on the sleeve and all the rest of it. And you haven't done that because you thought that what you were doing was valuable. Is that true?
Yeah, look, so I got promoted to Detective Inspector in 2009.
Yeah.
And that was the last time I sought promotion. I haven't applied since then.
Basically, you've dedicated the greater part of your career to this work for the reason that you think it has to be done, and you might as well be doing it. What is going to be the legacy when you do drive the caravan into the sunset in another, 2 years? Will you have left behind the people and structures that will continue to do this and do it well?
Look, that's a really great question. And when I was invited to work with the AFP and help develop the Australian Centre to Counter Child Exploitation, which is, I got seconded across into that role. It just seemed to be the right thing to do. It gave me the opportunity to succession plan the incoming Detective Inspector into Task Force Argos, which I continue to work with him really closely.
Right.
So something we do very abysmally is succession planning. So I've got him working 3 kilometres away from me. So that's really great. And I've been given this fantastic opportunity to help develop something that we really needed in this country, which is a central hub of coordination, both in victim identification, COVID online investigation, intelligence, triage, prevention and awareness. It's all under that one-stop shop. And there's no way I could say no to seeing out my career in a place like that.
It seems to me, and of course I'm older than you are, it seems to me that you have youth and energy on your side. You don't sound tired, you don't sound old. Do you feel that you've got specific knowledge and talents and experience that would be of use in this field internationally, albeit not working for Queensland Police, but, you know, being a consultant or something to other agencies? Is that possible?
I guess anything's possible, but one thing that COVID has taught me is not to plan too far ahead.
True. Or do you see yourself buying a new keyboard and going back to being a muso?
Well, you know, I've got my little home studio, which has got my analog synth collection in it, and it brings me a great deal of joy, I can assure you. So I'd love to be able to keep doing something in this field that helps continue, if I can anyway, in whatever way, shape or form, contribute to protecting kids. It's a fast-moving environment, though, so if you step out of it for too long, I guess your relevance fades fairly quickly. But in whatever capacity I can do in a part-time or full-time, I'll continue. My dad worked up until he was 77, you know.
Yeah, he was a naval officer?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah, Royal Australian Navy, and he worked up until basically cancer took him, you know.
That's good. Some of that work ethic rubbed off. You didn't think it did, but it did, see? When you were a young musician, you probably thought you weren't like him, but really you probably are. And we'll be back after this to finish our story. Jon Rouse, thank you once more for returning and talking to us again about your work with Task Force Argos. It's been a revelation and a privilege.
Great. Thanks very much, Andrew. It's been an absolute honour and privilege speaking to you, and I hope the content of what we've discussed resonates with your listening audience.
I'm sure it will. You can see the documentary The Children in the Pictures on SBS from October the 24th, or go to childreninthepictures.org and it will have information on how to stream it. Thanks for listening. Life and Crimes is a Sunday Herald Sun production for True Crime Australia. Our producer is Jon Burton. If you like the show, leave a 5-star rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to know more about these stories, links are in the description of this episode.